Hello and welcome to Football Digest Extra Time. I'm Chris Wheatley, Arsenal writer at Football London, and I'm joined with Neil McLeman, the Daily Mirror sports writer. And today we're going to be reflecting on Arsenal's game against Chelsea at the weekend. It was a big result for Arsenal and Mikel Arteta as they beat Frank Lampard's side 3-1. So we're going to be talking a little bit about Arsenal and, of course, Chelsea, what the result means for both sides. So going straight into it, Neil, what did you make of the game? Big result for Arsenal, like I said, and what did you make of the game?
Well, I think the Premier League's seen some extraordinary results this year with, Manchester United and 6 and Liverpool 7. But I don't think too many people would have predicted this one either. I mean, Arsenal going into this were in trouble, on a terrible run, and I think most people would have expected, I certainly did, a Chelsea victory. And in fact, it was quite the opposite. Arsenal were absolutely superb, some of the first 80-85 minutes, and Chelsea were very poor.
And what did you make of Mikel Arteta's team selection? I think a lot of fans were calling for him to play some of the young players after the senior players in recent weeks have kind of let him down. He finally played Emile Smith-Rowe, a 20-year-old midfielder, and Gabriel Martinelli started as well. What did you make of their performances? And do you think it was about time that he played the youngsters?
Well, it sort of is assessed as a mother invention, isn't it? Because we had COVID. We had a couple of ex-Chelsea players, Louise and Willian, out with COVID or COVID-related symptoms, and so they couldn't play. So Arteta was actually forced into it in a way, and it actually worked out really, really well. I remember I was at Arteta's first press conference when he unveiled just before Christmas last year, and he promised to bring this energy and a vitality to the way they played. And sometimes last season it had the FA Cup win. This last couple of months, the team that he promised, the vision he thought he promised to bring from Manchester City, if you like, just wasn't happening. And on Saturday night, that was the Arteta team and the Arteta game plan, the energy and the model that he saw, and I think Arsenal fans hoped to see when he came to the club. I mean, let's face it, they were absolutely terrific. They had maybe a little bit of luck with the penalty, and how often is Xhaka going to score a free kick like that? And Saka claimed he meant that chip. Well, good luck to him. But everything seemed to go totally right for them for 80 minutes. And maybe you earn your own luck, because I don't think they've been the most fortunate over the last couple of months. But it really was an outstanding display, which could be a turning point in the season. A turning point if, when we go on to speak about Brighton and West Brom in a minute, if that momentum carries on. But it was certainly a result and a performance and a message from the player. The players certainly showed they were playing for Arteta, the club, and Arteta really, really needed.
Why do you think it's taken so long for Arsenal to get going this season, and why have they been so poor in the Premier League?
I think a combination of reasons. I mean, without making an excuse, particularly for Arsenal, every club's had issues and every difficulty. I think last season covered up just by how many chances Aubameyang took. He was absolutely lethal, and the same number of chances haven't been created, and he hasn't been as good. I do think with the older players, I think Arteta's been. He knows that this club needs changing. The first team needs changing, and he knows at least, we're talking 5 or 6 players currently in that team aren't what he wants for Arsenal. And I think the challenge for Arteta is to move on the players that don't fit with his model and the way he wants to play, like bringing in players that he does want while keeping a success. And obviously, the balance hasn't been right because the results have been terrible for various reasons. So, going back to Saturday again, that gave him the belief that the younger player, if you're like the Europa League team who have done so well, it's given him the possibility that they can be the future of the club, that they are good enough and they can perform on the big occasion. So Arsenal have performed, pulled out performances like against Arsenal, against Chelsea in the Cup final, Community Shield. They won Old Trafford. The challenge for them now is to sustain that level, not just produce great performances against the big clubs, produce solid performance against the teams that, quote, should be beating, like Brighton and West Brom in the next 2 fixtures.
And moving on to those games, tomorrow against Brighton and then Saturday against West Brom, do you think those matches could be more difficult than the one that Arteta had at the weekend against Chelsea. The fact that Sam Allardyce has just come in at West Brom, and you saw the way they played against Liverpool, really defensively solid, as we all expected. But you think those two games could be the most difficult of Arsenal's kind of festive fixtures?
Potentially, and I certainly think they're as important, because all the talk of say this may be a turning point for Arsenal. This the youngsters into the future. If they lose badly these next two games, it's back to square one. It's back to where we were just before Christmas. So got to remember about Brighton. Brighton did the double over Arsenal last year, and West Brom. Sam Allardyce likes nothing better than beating Arsenal, and the way he'll set the team up, he'll make it very difficult with set pieces, etc. So this is a big challenge. This is the challenge for Arteta and for the young players, who I assume he'll keep faith with. That wasn't just a one-off. This is the way that Arsenal are going to be from now on. And Brighton's home record is terrible, and the only team they've beat home this whole calendar year, I think, in the Premier League is Arsenal. They play a certain style that, they're not ruthless enough. I mean, let's face it. If Arsenal want to have any pretensions of being what they should be beating Brighton, and that, as you say, offers its own challenge to them tomorrow night.
And then I guess we should touch on the January transfer window, as it's coming up very soon. Do you think Arsenal need to do business in January? You've already mentioned that a lot of those players are probably going to be on their way out in the next few months, either in January or the summer. Which players do you think they should need to sign? Which positions do you think they should sign? And what kind of business do you think they'll be doing in January?
Well, they'll be looking to offload players to clear the bill. Ease the wage bill, but how many of those we're talking about? The Mustafi, the Kolasinac, the great Ozil conundrum. How many of those players are actually going to leave the club? We'll have to see. Let's face it, they haven't been very successful in that case of getting players away. I think the bigger, I would say, they still need a player in midfield to play alongside Thomas Partey. Thomas Partey is one thing that we spoke earlier about. One of the reasons why Arsenal haven't performed so well. I think one of the reasons we can go back to is Thomas Partey hasn't been playing regularly. He's definitely an Arteta signing. He's the kind of player that represents the way that Arteta wants to play. So if he's fit and firing, I still think we could do with another of all playing midfield to play alongside him. So for long term. So whether that's going to be this January or this, in the summer, I think we're still evolving. But I mean, what we can look at the positive things what Arsenal did against Chelsea. The goalkeeper looked good. The fullbacks looked excellent. Look, Tierney's super buy. As long the question against him is staying fit. So as long as Kieran Tierney is fit, he's a superb player. Bellerin looked good. I know he's been linked with Barcelona in the Daily Mirror today. That's an issue for Arsenal, but that looked good. Lacazette looked good. So Aubameyang's fully fit. Got three behind. That looked really good. The three behind the striker that looked really good. So for me, the biggest issue still is the holding midfielders, the centre of the park.
And then moving on to Chelsea, very disappointing result for Frank Lampard's side. And Lampard was visibly frustrated, you could say angry with his team afterwards, and he described them as lazy, or the performance as lazy. What did you make of Lampard coming out after the game, describing his players as lazy? And
yeah, I just think it showed his frustration as well, because I watched Chelsea play against West Ham on the Monday, and the score was 3-0, and that was a really flattering 3-0. They weren't that good in that, and certainly for the first 80 minutes or so, until Abraham scored those two late goals, you would have thought West Ham were arguably the better team. So that's basically 4 games in the trot now. They have played pretty poorly. So the two away defeats, and the West Ham went, and now there's some. But let's face it, for 80, 85 minutes, they didn't turn up. They really didn't turn up. And this is a team that shows how crazy the Premier League being, that Chelsea had that long 17-game unbeaten run before that, and they've come to a pretty grinding halt. I think there are a couple of issues here. I mean, the big one for me is Timo Werner, who was both the West Ham game and against Arsenal was just dreadful. He just absolutely shot of confidence. That's what 9-10 games he hasn't scored now. Doesn't look happy with the position he's played in. And that is an issue that they're going straight into another fixture against Villa. I'm very interested to see what Lampard does with Werner, whether he keeps faith or whether he takes him out for a game or two. We've got Man City coming up next week. The other issue, I mean, I think Giroud actually maybe in sort of papered over the cracks, if you like, or he was just in such good form and scored so many goals. I don't think they look as good without Giroud. So all the money, the £250 million they spent last summer, that he brings something to the team that they don't have when he's not there. So it's funny. We were talking 3-4 weeks ago, before this game, Chelsea's potential title contenders, outsiders, and I think everyone's had a little had to reevaluate that over the last couple of weeks.
You just mentioned Giroud. What do you make of him? He scored those 4 goals against Sevilla recently, and he's never been a regular starter really wherever he's been. Even at Arsenal, he was towards the end of his time there. He was kind of a bench player, an impact player, and he's been the same at Chelsea. Why do you think he doesn't start games, and why do you think he didn't start at the weekend against his old side?
I think there was a certain. I think the first question this weekend, I think the rotations that Lampard wasn't happy about playing 2 games in 48 hours. I expect to see Giroud starting against Villa in their next match for that reason. I think there's a certain amount of sort of squad rotation. I think Giroud generally, I mean, to regard him as pretty underrated and what he has achieved throughout his career, and also for France. I mean, he's until recently he'd scored more goals for France this season than he had for Chelsea. He's got an extraordinary scoring record. He's only behind Henry on an international level. He's a World Cup winner. He's done it consistently wherever he's gone. I can only think that managers don't see him as being quick enough and mobile enough to play the way they want to play and getting in behind, etc. But what he does offer, I think you've got to look at his strengths rather than his weaknesses. That his hold play is superb, his link play, and he's an absolutely lethal finisher. And I think he's got a huge part to play in the rest of Chelsea's season.
And where do you think Chelsea will? Where do you think Chelsea will finish this season? Like we said, there was such a disappointing result, but this festive period, it's almost a kind of damage limitation for a lot of teams where it comes to congested games and players getting injured. So where do you think both teams, I guess we should talk about Arsenal as well, where do you think both teams will finish come the end of the season?
I thought it was very interesting because I switched on to Sky the Arsenal-Chelsea game. The pundits were talking about that 1 win from Arsenal. They're almost as close to the Champions League places as they were to the relegation. So it's just how tight it is in the middle of the table. I mean, I think Arsenal, if a top 6 finish would be the way they have, would be good progress. And I think they're going to make progress in the Europa League. So let's face it, Arsenal is a transition season, it's consolidations. Chelsea, I think it's really interesting I still think it's open for them. So if you're looking at who's going to be finishing the top 4 this season, I would still say Liverpool, Manchester City, the top 2. Still think Liverpool are the favourites, and Man City are still where they are without playing well. After that, I still think it's pretty up in the air. So you're looking at Manchester United, Tottenham, Chelsea, even Everton, the way they've been playing, are contending for that. So those places, 3rd and 4th place, are still really, really open. I mean, if I had to guess right now, I'd say Manchester and Tottenham for 3rd and 4th. But who knows what's going to happen this season? Chelsea could still easily finish in the top 4.
Do you think Arsenal can pip Chelsea to a top 4 spot, perhaps, or is it too early to say that?
I think that's asking a lot. I think that's asking a lot on one result. I feel they're not as bad as what they were in that horrendous run when they went 7 or 8 games without winning. I don't think they're as good. I don't think they're as good a side as those other teams, and certainly not as good a squad. And what I think what we've seen against Arsenal, against some of those other teams. I still think Manchester United, Chelsea, and Tottenham are better sides and got a better squads than Arsenal right now. So I think this season, come to good cup runs, top 6 maybe. That's what Arsenal should be aiming at. Anything else of that would be at this stage an amazing bonus, I think.
Neil, really good to talk to you about the Arsenal-Chelsea game and both teams. I think we've covered it quite comprehensively, and like you said, it's going to be an interesting few games for both sides now, and hopefully we're going to see lots of good games over the next few days. So it's been good to talk with you on Football Digest Extra Time, Neil. Thanks for speaking with me again, and hopefully speak to you soon.
Will do.